Hi, today I'm going to go through USD and layers and how we use them in our pipeline. I'm going to make some very simple examples at first just so we can go through and understand like the fundamental pieces, and then we'll get into more complex stuff. I've already kind of made these examples and I'll just go through them real quick. So the first one I'll make with you just so you can see how simple it is. So I make a new scene, I go and I add a cube. And then I save this as a USDA, so a cube, and we'll call this cube create, and then you can just save this thing as a USDA. And then once it's a USDA instead of a USD, it becomes human readable. And I've kind of done that for all the files I'm going to go through, just so we can look and see what's under the hood and what's in there. What's great about Create is that it just stores the information that's in the USD. And nothing else. There's no bloat or any extra information, so it's easy to troubleshoot, and it's also easy to see like what's happening. In every file there's like a little bit of audio, and then there's the viewports, the top left and right, just so Create knows where to look, and then like the world and the scale. And you see here's the default light that exists and the cube, and you can see like it's just the cube's at 0, 0, the scale is 1, 1, 1, the rotate has no rotation on it. So it's all information is very simple and very easy to read and is accessible. So let me show you the other files I made just to make it fast to go through this. I made that cube that we just made together. I made another cube that is red, and you can see here, let's just look and see what's inside. We have that light, the cube, and looks. We have a red and a blue look, and the cube is the red look. And let's look at that in the USDA format. So we have the cube. You can see that it's red, and you can see that here are the two MDLs, the red and the blue. And then I made a blue cube. This blue cube has been moved, and it has the blue material assigned to it, and it's scaled out so it's easy to see. So let's look at that real quick. So here's the blue file. You can see it's assigned to blue. It has the scale here, and it has been moved here, and it has the red and the blue material. And then what I want to show you is how putting these together in different ways does different things, essentially. So I'm just going to go make a new file. Delete this light out, and I'm going to bring in as a layer through this layer menu that red cube. Voila, there's that red cube. And now I'm going to bring in that blue cube that we made over the top. Now what happened here might surprise you. So even though each file that we're bringing in contains a cube, there's only one cube at the end, right? And that's because of how USD works. So USD only allows one thing by one name to exist, and you can use this to your advantage, which we'll show you in a second. So when it has the red cube, and that red cube has the red and blue looks, and then when I bring over the top of it a blue cube with the red and blue looks, these are complete replacements. So even though these files have contained all that stuff, when the USD compiles, it looks from left to right, and it says, well, there's this cube and there's this one, and this one now takes precedence over that one. So when we open up those two files, we see a blue and a red cube. Now the other way of modifying this, and I'll make a new file real quick. So we could insert that red cube file, which brings in all the information in the red cube, and then we could create a delta layer on top of this, and this is going to be a file that contains a change, not actual geometry information. So I will create that real quick just so we can do it from scratch. It's going to save over the top. Okay, so this is a completely blank USD file. And then what we're going to do is we're going to change this to our authoring layer, and now I'm going to save the change I've made into this. So I'm taking this cube and I'm going to change it to blue. And I'm going to change the scale to 3. And then I'm going to store that change in this USD. So if I open up this USD file, actually, let me just show you what this file looks like, just to be clear. So this file now, the layers, it's completely empty of geometry. It just contains those reference to those two layers, right? It just has that red cube and that blue delta. And if you were to look into the blue delta file, what is in there is, if you looked at it through Omniverse, let's just open that up. It's blank, right? There's no cube inside of there, because all that is the change that occurred to that cube, not the cube itself. And then let me show you what that would look like here. So you can see there's no cube in here, but there's a reference to, it's telling you over the top of the cube, add this change this material to blue. And so we're going to look at those two ideas of of something existing and then being replaced completely, and then something existing and then more information being added over the top, saying like we want to change this aspect of this thing through layers. All right, that's kind of this in its simplest form, and now we'll look at it in an actual like practical show-like example. All right, I'm going to go through now a more complicated example of this. So we've made this kind of little demo show. It's got a couple of shots and a couple of scenes, and it'll walk through our pipeline using that same concept I showed, but obviously stacked and a little bit more complicated. So the first thing we're going to look at is this Jensen toy asset, which is a character. And for us, characters, we break up everything a little bit depending on what its use case is, obviously. And a character is probably the most complicated of the setups. So I'll start with that so we can kind of go through what happens under the hood there. So this character is composed of 4 layers. You can see that the 4 layers are the model, the materials, and a delta position and a delta material. These 2 deltas are actually empty right now, and I'll show you why they exist a little later on. But it's essentially to push data from another file into this bridge file that we use. I'm going to turn these on and off so you can kind of see what's happening here. So the reference model, the model comes in without any textures. It has assignment placeholders, but without the textures themselves. And then the materials come in over the top and then texture the object. The reason for this is this means that we can version the model and version the materials separately. So let's just say you get the model locked down after 2 versions, and you need to keep iterating on the materials. You just changing that materials file, and it's loading in and not affecting anything else. Let me show you a little bit of how that all works. So if you look at, I'm turning these layers off and on so you can kind of see this is bringing in a reference version of the toy Jensen, and that reference version, if we actually look in the details here, I'll show you. You can see that it is coming from version 2 of our models directory in here, and this version 2 has the MDLs here, but they're all empty. So they're just a placeholder so that this goes the right thing. And then over the top of this, the same name, Toy Jensen looks, material directory is full. You can see it's in here. It has all the same. It has the exact same name structure. So then it replaces those MDLs with the ones that actually have all the data in them and have been tweaked and conditioned to be the right materials. And so you can see like this set of materials that's being loaded, being referenced in here. Let's see, this is the version 2 of the model and version 1 of the materials. So by keeping these separate, we can iterate on them individually. So you can see model goes up to version 2 here, and then materials version 1 in this case. And then we bring them through this thing we're using as a reference holder. And the reason we're referencing these things is because when it's a reference, it's bringing it in and it is just a pointer to that file, essentially locked. So we can't accidentally overwrite the file. With layers, this is a direct connection to a USD file. So if it wasn't referenced in, there's a chance you could actually write changes all the way down your stack. So we purposely make like this breakpoint, which is this reference holder that's bringing them in. So if you look at this reference holder, this is the model, and it's bringing in the version. So we would update the version number here to bring in whatever model it is. And if we look at the model that it's bringing in, so let's look at version 2. You can see that this is the model without any materials on it, and the pointer. You'll notice that there's a background file to this, and what that is an Hdri, so you can see it, but it's in the working null. You can see that here's the default prim, and anything referencing this file in will grab it by default from the default prim. So it grabs this stack only. So you can have your working files set up with stuff you want to see when you're in them, but it won't go through the chain that wise. It'll just bring in this and not the Hdri. Okay, so that's kind of our more complex asset. Let's look at what a simpler asset would look like. So here is our environment for this file, and you can see it's a little bit simpler. We're not separating the materials, and we have a bunch of objects all as one thing. We're just bringing it in as a reference, and the reason for that, once again, is like we want to make sure that it's not editable in the higher file, so no one can change this accidentally or push a change past this point. And that's kind of what that little orange arrow means, that this is a referenced object and not editable down there. But the one thing that we have done is we've made these two deltas that are blank, so that if we do want to make a change that gets to all the files, you can just make the change in the delta. So you'll bring in this bridge file into your main scene, which will bring in the environment, and if you want to change something for all the other files, you just store it in this delta, but never actually changing the actual referenced kitchen. So it's a non-destructive workflow. Alright, let's look at the shot structure. So the shot structure, we were broken up into two scenes, scene 10 and scene 20, and then in scene 10 we have two shots, scene 10 shot 10, scene 10 shot 20, and in here we have a shared folder. And in the shared folder is a base scene that we're going to load into both of those. So as this is loading. Okay, so in here you'll see we have the environment file that we just looked at, which is our kitchen. Here we go, bringing in the bridge of the kitchen close-up. A bridge bringing in Hdri so that we have our lighting. A bridge bringing in our coffee grinder. Our bridge bringing in a salt box. Our toy Jensen, which is not placed because we know we're going to place animation on him, so he's at 0, 0, and a bridge for spoon asset, which is also not placed because we know we're going to bring animation data onto him. So this is kind of our environment, and then this delta is the starting placement of basically these two assets, the coffee grinder and the salt. If I were to turn this off, give it a second, you see they go to 0, 0. So this is just kind of a placement delta. So the only thing that's stored in this, like we talked about before, the only thing that's stored in this is just a positional data assigned to these things, but not the actual things themselves. And then when you look at our scene, you can see that what comes through stage-wise is just that these are all referenced, right? So these are all assets that have kind of like a firewall that you can't go down below and change them. But for example, when we were talking about that delta, you can see that we can come down to these deltas. We were talking about the kitchen close-up and the delta of like a positional delta, and we can set this as our authoring layer by double and clicking on it. And then if we wanted to make any sort of positional change to our kitchen close-up, we could store it inside of this delta, which means that anytime we reference bridge kitchen close-up, it would bring that change. So let's make an ever so slight change to this. We'll just slide this cutting board over ever so slightly, and we'll save it inside of that delta. So now whenever bridge kitchen close-up is brought in, this board has been moved over ever so slightly, and for all the files referencing it, that change will be stored with it. But in the original asset, if we go back to it, we've never actually changed or affected the original asset. Okay, so let's look at how this all comes into a shot. So we're going to open up scene 10, shot 10, and then that base file we're just looking at, you can see here is coming in. as our base, and we're going to show this for all the scene 10 shots. They're all going to start with this base, and then we have an animation over, which is positioning the spoon, and then our toy Jensen animation over, which is positioning our Jensen and also adding a little bit of animation. And we'll come back and add a little more animation to it, but this would just say this is first pass. And then we're bringing in our camera information from another USD. So you can see in our structure we have the deltas, which are any changes, the clips, which is any animations, and then the camera, which would be the camera for the shot. Just for convenience sake, we generally type in the frame range into the camera layers name, but if you look at the camera itself coming in, it doesn't have that frame range in. So if we update it or change it, it's easy to access that way. Okay, so then we've set our frame range to this, and then we have our animation sorted out. So what's important is that these files right here are just deltas and overs, right? They're not the assets themselves. They're just positional changes or animation added to these things. So for each file, all the actual stuff coming in, like asset-wise, is coming in from this base file, and then everything else is just movement or positional changes, which keeps this file extremely light. So this file right here is only a few kilobytes because it's just references to these layers and not the actual assets themselves. So anyone working on this is only going to have to pull down a few kilobytes in order to change or work on this without having to save and upload over and over again a bunch of information.
So let's take a look at another shot. So this is the exact same structure. It's being in that base file, it's bringing in its own animation clips, camera, and delta information. It all starts exactly the same, but loads those changes on top. Now, let's say you wanted to save a change for the whole scene universally. Like we know we were going to change the salt box to something different. You could update the base file, and it would just you wouldn't have to go through 100 shots and update it. It would all automatically update and populate. Same thing if you wanted to update the textures for Jensen. We would just update the textures for the main character file, and it would populate all the way through. Depending on what shots you want to affect, depends on where you update them and where you change them. If you want to update and change 10 shots at the same time, it's really easy and efficient. So just to summarize, the structure of the layers is pretty deep, but it allows you to have control over multiple levels, over what you distribute the changes to. So for each shot, there is a shared information that is coming from the base, the shared file here, and this goes to all the shots. In the individual shots, in the individual folders, are the pieces that are unique to them. So for the animation, a specific shot and camera. That also means there is no heavy data stored in the whole shot structure. The folder itself is extremely light because it just has deltas and changes to the content, not the content itself. And all the content is stored in the assets and is all protected from accidentally pushing changes down to it. But you can purposely push changes down to it that are stored in non-destructive workflow. Well, thank you. I hope this helps you out. Bye.